Prosecution's next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People call Investigator Tom Cowing.
All right. Just because it's been so long, I'm going to swear you in again. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please start by stating your full name and introducing yourself to the jury?
Yes. My name is Tom Cowing. Last name spelling C-O-W-I-N-G.
And where are you employed, sir?
The Plymouth County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed there?
23 years.
What is your current assignment there?
I am a patrol lieutenant.
What does it mean to be a lieutenant?
Just supervisor over our 6 sergeants who supervise 30 other deputies.
And back in, I know the jury's already met you from the measurements testimony, so I'll move a little more quickly. But back in November of 2012, what was your assignment then?
Sergeant investigator.
And is investigator kind of like a detective?
Yes.
Were you involved in the Redwine case back then?
Yes.
Okay. And when did you get involved in that case, roughly speaking?
11/20/2012.
And then did you become, as the case went on, one of the investigators assigned to it?
Yes.
And as part of that, did you collect items of evidence throughout the case?
I did.
So I'm going to direct you to specific topics and move through them. Were you present at a search warrant on November 29th of 2012?
Yes.
At the defendant's residence?
Yes.
Did you collect some items there from Joe Clayton?
Yes.
And were those swabs?
Yes.
And did you also collect the Nerf football from Peggy Russin?
Yes.
Did you log those evidence into property and evidence pursuant to procedures with Investigator Kevin Brown?
Yes.
And then on November 30th of 2012, were you assigned to execute a court order to obtain control samples of DNA?
I did.
And who were you going to collect that from?
Mr. Redwine.
Was there another investigator with you?
And Patterson.
Okay. And how did you arrange to make that evidence collection?
We were able to speak with Mr. Redwine over the phone and agreed to meet at the Bayfield Marshal's office.
Did he come with someone else?
His brother, David Stone.
Okay. Was David Stone his brother? Was he staying with him at the time?
Yes.
Given that he was staying at the home, did you collect swabs from him as well?
I did.
So with regard to the collection of buccal swabs, can you explain to the jury what that is and how you do it?
Okay. So buccal swabs are Q-tip applicators, excuse me, with log wood handles. They come in a paper packet, usually 2 per packet, with gloved hands. Remove the swabs. Ask the person you're swabbing to open their mouth wide and circular motions around the cheek, gum area. Put the Q-tips back in the original package, down inside the package, and then put that package inside of a paper evidence bag and let it dry overnight.
And then you seal it up after that?
Yes.
And do you log those into property and evidence?
Correct.
And are those later sent off to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for testing in the case?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd ask to approach with People's Exhibits 138 and 139, please.
Okay.
Investigator Cowing, have you seen People's Exhibits 138 and 139 before?
Yes.
Are those the swabs that you collected in this case?
They are.
And is one of those exhibits for David Stone and one of those exhibits for Mark Redwine?
Yes.
Do you recognize the packaging?
I do.
And is your name on it?
Yes.
Judge, at this time I move to admit People's Exhibits 138 and 139 into evidence.
Mr. Moran? Okay. They're admitted.
Now, Investigator Cowing, did you stay assigned to the case after that as well for further assignment?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware of plans to search Middle Mountain Road in the case?
Yes.
And when was that scheduled for the bigger search?
That was scheduled for the following year in June starting June 22nd of 2013.
Had you been up there before that?
Yes.
Okay. And then, for example, in early June, did you do a search where you yourself drove the road and then went up to the end of the road and searched the Tuckerville area?
I did.
This time, Judge, I'm going to ask you to approach the People's Exhibit 503.
You may.
Investigator Cowing, have you seen People's Exhibit 503 before?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate map of the search you did in just driving the road and then the Tuckerville area?
Correct.
This time I'd move to admit People's 503 into evidence, Your Honor.
Mr. Moran? No objection. It's admitted.
Can you just briefly explain for the jury the search that you did?
So on this day, I drove all the way up the 12-mile drive from County Road 501 all the way up to Tuckerville, which is approximately 12 miles, and to drive around up top and have a view of the mines and then walk around that area.
Okay. And the map itself, can we publish 503, Judge?
Yes.
The map itself shows that pink highlighting along the roadway. Is that more typical of the types of searches you were doing at the time, just kind of checking the roadway as you went?
Yes.
And then did there come a point where law enforcement later that month was going to do a bigger search that covered areas off of Middle Mountain Road?
Correct.
Why were you waiting until late June to do that search?
Well, waiting for snow to melt and weather to improve, and then of course the pre-planning and getting operations planned and getting folks to help with the search.
Was that going to be a difficult search to do in the winter?
Yes.
So as the search came, were you someone that in the context of the investigation had contact with the defendant?
Can you repeat?
Yeah. In the context of the investigation, did you have contacts with the defendant?
Yes.
For example, did you give him updates in his son's case?
Yes.
Did you inform him that there was going to be a search on Middle Mountain Road in late June?
Yes.
Did you inform him of that on more than one occasion?
I did.
And then did you make efforts to tell him the dates when that search came closer?
Yes.
What kinds of things did you do to try to let Mr. Redwine know we're doing a search if you want to join in the search looking for your son?
So prior to the big search, I went to Mr. Redwine's house a few times. I made several phone calls.
Did you leave him messages?
I did.
Did you email him?
Yes.
Did you hear back from him about participation in the search?
Eventually.
Okay. And what about the rest of Dylan's family? Had they asked to stay informed about the big Middle Mountain search as well?
Yes.
And did they, in fact, get notified and plan to come for the search?
Yes.
Where were they coming from when they came down for the search?
From the Monument, Colorado Springs area.
Now, did you finally get a hold of the defendant on June 21st?
I did.
And how did you get a hold of him?
Through telephone contact.
Can you just explain that to the jury, please?
So I was in my patrol vehicle out in the field. I was able to speak with Mr. Redwine and advise him that the search would be tomorrow, and I asked for his whereabouts.
And did you inform him it was going to be, well, what did he say about his whereabouts?
He said he was on the road.
What did he say about why he hadn't called back when you'd left him messages, emails, etc.?
He had said that,
I'm going to object and perhaps we approach on this issue. All right.
Thank you. I think my last question to you was if you explained why he didn't call you back.
Yes.
What did he say?
He said he had dropped his cell phone in the sink and it stopped working.
I'm going to come back to that in a while. When you did speak with him, is it fair to say he was out of state?
Yes.
Did you do the Middle Mountain Road searches without Mr. Redwine?
We did.
Okay. Elaine, Corey, and Mike Hall, did they in fact come to town?
They did.
And is this the search the jury's already heard for multiple days was on the hillside?
Yes.
And some of Dylan's bones were found and some, very few of his personal items were found?
Correct.
Do you recall what personal items of Dylan's were actually found during the 622 to 625 search?
I do.
Is it a, well, let me ask you this. Overall, do you remember anything about a backpack being found?
No backpack.
Or a cell phone or an iPod?
No cell phone or iPod.
Any wallet or ball cap?
No.
Did they?
Just pardon my interruption. I may have missed it, but my understanding is that 507 was admitted and you got 503 up.
It was 503.
It's 503, Judge. Pardon me.
Go ahead.
Okay. So in terms of personal items that were found, was there a shoe, a sock, and some earbuds?
Correct.
And then some clothing scraps?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to, at this point in time, determine that it was Dylan Redwine and that you had found his remains?
Yes.
Were you assigned to contact the defendant?
Yes.
Did you have a conversation with him?
I did.
And did you tell him you needed him to come back to look at some things?
Yes.
And did he ask you what those things were?
He did.
You may.
Investigator Cowling, have you seen the disc that is marked People's Exhibit 142 before?
Yes.
How do you know it's the same disc that you've seen?
My initials are on
And
it.
have you listened to it?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate recording of your conversation with the defendant?
Yes.
This time I've moved to admit People's 142 into evidence.
You may. Well, excuse me. I'm sorry. I guess I was a little quick on that. Mr. Moran?
Well, now the suspense is building. Judge, we'll incorporate our previous objections.
I understand
We
that.
object.
Okay. It's admitted.
So in that call that we're going to listen to, does he ask you about a couple of particular items if they were found?
He does.
And we publish 142, please.
You may.
Investigator Tom Cowan, today's date, Tuesday, 6/25/2013. Time is 17:30 hours. So let's call Mark Redwine. You're my patrol car. Mark? Yes. Hey, Tom Cowan. Hello? Hey, Mark, this is Tom Cowan. I'm calling from Tanya Goldwhite's phone. Sorry, man. I know that my phone doesn't work on Middle Mountain, and for whatever reason, Verizon does on AT&T. Hey, I'm going to make this quick. Hey, I would like for you to come back to Durango so I can have you identify some items of interest. Where are you at? Okay. I would like for you, and I want Elaine to come here as well, so we can, look some things over that we located on Middle Mountain. Okay. So when can that happen? Yeah, it's the reference doing. Just tell me when I can expect you. That would be good. Yeah, we would like for that to happen. You have my number. I'll be up here at the mountain the rest of the week. But please call me as soon as you get on the road so I can arrange a time to meet with you. I can't go over that right now. I'd rather do this in person. Just to be professional about it. Hey, they're trying to get me on the radio. Hold on. Okay. Cool. Okay, I'll do that. Oh, sorry, Mark. Yeah, I missed that last thing. Go ahead. Okay. We're in the United States. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, okay, great. Give me a call when you're on the road, and we'll have a time to meet. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Had you in fact found clothing scraps?
Yes.
Had you in fact found a shoe?
Yes.
Between June 21st and June 25th, when you had informed him and he had said his phone dropped in the sink up to June 25th, had he been calling you asking you for updates on the search?
One more time, please.
So we talked about June 21st. You called him and notified him, we're starting the search tomorrow. You haven't called me back. That whole context. And then June 25th, you notify him you have found remains. We already covered that he wasn't present for the search. As the search was going on, was he calling you and checking in about the results of the search?
No.
Did it, in fact, take him 2 days to arrive?
Yes.
And did he meet you at the La Plata County Sheriff's Office?
He did.
Did you notify him of Dylan's death?
I did.
Did you show him items of what was found?
I did.
And then did he have an emotional reaction as you told him that?
Yes.
What did he do?
He started to weep.
I'm sorry, what?
He started to weep.
Okay. And then at that point in time, I think this has been covered, but let me make sure. At that point in time, had you found the skull yet or not?
Not yet.
Okay. So you had multiple interactions with Mr. Redwine prior to this?
Yes.
Had you ever mentioned to him the concept of blunt force trauma?
Never.
And have you re-reviewed your materials to check that you didn't say that in one of your casual conversations or something with him?
I did.
Did you have any reason to suggest blunt force trauma prior to finding the skull?
No.
And are you just generally aware that that same day, June 27th of 13, was when Brandon Redwine contacted law enforcement?
Yes.
I want to segue now to August of 2013, after Dylan's remains were found. Did you take further steps to investigate the defendant's home?
Yes.
Did you invite a canine handler named Karen Corcoran, who's a police officer from Wisconsin?
Yes.
And did you know generally that her dog was a dog trained in human remains detection?
Yes.
And did you have some items that you wanted her to check in the case?
Correct.
All right. So what information did Investigator Corcoran have generally going into doing her work in the case?
Just basic information on Dylan arriving by airplane in Durango, father picking him up, eventually going back to the house, and Dylan and his disappearance, and last seen by his father.
And then did you additionally indicate his remains were up on Middle Mountain Road at some point in time?
Yes.
Did you give her any specifics as to locations in the home where CBI had found physical evidence?
No.
Did you give her any specifics as to where you believe the evidence might be located?
No.
I want to start with what I'll call the clothing search from August 5th of 2013. Where did that occur?
What we call the Pepsi building.
What is the Pepsi building?
It is an old Pepsi distribution center that's next door to the sheriff's office at 742 Turner that we county bought.
Is it a big warehouse area?
Yes.
How big?
Approximately 120 feet long by 60 feet wide.
And had the defendant's clothes that he was wearing in the Walmart video been collected?
Yes.
Okay, so generally, were those clothes searched by Officer Corcoran?
Yes.
Where did you guys, who was present for that?
Ms. Corcoran, Investigator Goldbright, myself.
And where did you and Investigator Goldbright stand as Molly was doing the searching?
I recall standing back 25 or 30 feet away, just not to be in the way.
Okay. And she's testified, so I'm not going to get into any results. But after that testing was completed, did you then leave and go to the impound lot?
Yes.
Where's the impound lot of the sheriff's office located?
The impound lot is behind the sheriff's office. I would say that's the northeast corner. And it's a fenced-off area where we put impound cars.
Okay. Did you decide to run Molly through a test?
Yes.
What did you suggest could be the test?
I suggested to Ms. Corcoran, just for my personal benefit, wanted to see what the dog could do. And I told her there were approximately 12 vehicles in that impound lot, and I knew 2 of them contained dead bodies.
And did you know that because you were involved to some extent in those cases?
Yes.
And to one, did you assist, and Investigator Goldbright was one of the leads on it?
Yes.
And you were present for that car being seized, et cetera?
Yes.
And then the other, were you actually the person that took the body out of the vehicle?
Yes.
Okay, so did you tell her which vehicles they were?
Did not.
And how are the vehicles orchestrated or lined up in that lot?
So typically they're arranged in a U-shaped fashion. So when we have a new tow come in, the tow truck can enter the impound lot without any obstruction and then place a vehicle where they can.
And so where did you stand when she worked her dog?
I stood, we have gates, 2 big swinging gates that lead into the impound, and I remember standing right near there.
Okay. So back away from all the vehicles?
Exactly.
And was Investigator Goldbright with you back away from all the vehicles as well?
Yes.
Okay. Did you give her any other information other than that 2 cars in there had contained dead bodies?
No other information.
Pardon me, sir. Objection as to either of the vehicles, any of the vehicles that Investigator Cowan appears not hearsay. I know that he testified that he actually had some involvement in moving the body from one of the vehicles.
We talked about both of them. He said he was involved in the investigation in one, and then he said he removed the body in the other. So why is that a problem?
Well, I guess I just need clarification on which is which.
And even if he just got that from another person, again, under the hearsay rule, it has to be offered with the truth of the matter asserted, which in one sense it is, because you have to know that. But in the broader sense, it's being offered for testing purposes of Molly or reliability purposes of Molly, and therefore this testimony is not hearsay. So you overruled it if there even is a hearsay objection available to you.
Thank you, Judge. In the car where you didn't take the body out, was that a car that you were able to smell the odor in?
Correct.
And was that more of a gory, bloody type of scene?
It was.
And then in the one that you pulled the body out, well, let's talk about that in a second. First, I just want to talk about what Molly did. So did you observe Molly working?
I did.
And did Molly do a trained final response on 2 of the vehicles?
She did.
What were those 2 vehicles?
The first vehicle, excuse me, was the Jeep Liberty that contained a male who had died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound and had been in that vehicle for roughly 3 weeks.
Is that the one that you could smell?
Yes.
And then I'm sorry, you said a Jeep Liberty?
Jeep Liberty.
In the Jeep Liberty, was there like matter and stuff in there? Is that where the suicide had occurred?
Correct.
And you said you yourself could smell it. How was it stored in the impound lot?
So on June 18th, 2012, I recall that scene and following the tow truck back to the impound lot and watched the driver put the vehicle in the impound lot.
Do you recall if the windows were open or closed?
They were open.
Why?
To air out the vehicle.
Was all of the matter and stuff inside the vehicle?
Correct.
And did Molly ever go inside the vehicle herself?
No.
And that you had said was June 18th of 2012?
Correct.
And you were doing this search on May 5th of 2013? I'm sorry,
August
5th of 2013, my mistake.
Yes.
So over a year later.
14 months, yes.
Then what was the second vehicle that Molly did a trained frontal response on?
The second vehicle was a Ford minivan.
Okay. And that was the one that you had directly pulled the body out of?
Yes.
What was the date that you removed the dead body from that van?
It was my anniversary, June 16th, 2012.
So that, again, was within 2 days of the other one and roughly 14 months or 13 months prior, over a year.
Yes.
Tell the jury the circumstances of the van.
So in this particular case, a female had died of a drug overdose inside her van.
I think I understand the court's ruling, but I just need to make sure that our record's clear that this is the part that is hearsay objection.
Okay. And I have the same ruling, so you're still overruled. Go ahead.
Could you please continue to explain to the jury the circumstances of the dead body in the van?
I was on call investigator. I heard about the call over the radio, so I went directly there. I did my crime scene photos and everything. And then coroner was called out. It was time to remove the body from the vehicle. And I recall picking her up and placing her in a body bag.
How long had she been deceased long?
No.
How could you tell?
She was warm to the touch, and rigor mortis had not set in yet.
Any odor of a body in that case?
No.
And any blood or biological matter or anything like that strewn about the car?
I recall some vomit, but no blood.
And then how was that vehicle stored?
That vehicle was stored in the same fashion as the Jeep Liberty.
Okay. And were the windows open or closed? Do you know?
There were two rear vent windows that were open.
And 14 months later, 13 months later, Molly indicated on that vehicle as well.
Yes.
After that, you had said there were about a dozen vehicles.
Yes.
You had knowledge generally of what's going on in the impound lot?
I do.
So after indicating on those two vehicles, did you then take Officer Corcoran and Molly to the Redwine residence?
Yes.
You had talked already about the information going in, but what did you do when you got there?
Walked the dogs around the property.
Did you ask consent of the defendant in the search?
Yes.
What did you ask him?
I told him that there was a dog team in town, and I would like to bring the dogs to his residence and just walk around the property.
Did you explain to him that it was a human remains detection canine?
I said it was a scent dog.
Okay. Did you explain to him that you were going to be looking for the odor of human remains, or just generally tell him you were bringing a scent dog there?
Just generally told him. Scent dog.
Did he agree and consent to allow you to have a scent dog there?
Yes.
And then what did the dog do outside? And I don't, let me be clear. We've had expert testimony about the results. I'm just wondering things like where you stood, what the dog did, and what you did next.
I recall standing away from the house near the road. It's just like a kind of a cattle guard kind of bridge over irrigation ditch or creek. Watched Ms. Corcoran work her dog around the residence.
And then did she come back and report to you whether there are trained final responses?
She did.
And did she say, was there also a Chevy truck there?
It was.
And was that part of where she went?
Yes.
And then when she came back, did she indicate to you whether it'd be worthwhile to try to get inside the home to do an additional search?
She did.
What did you do then?
I then called Mr. Redwine from my cell phone in the driveway and asked for permission to enter the home.
Okay. And did you get permission to enter the home?
Yes.
And did you in fact enter the home?
Yes.
Did Officer Corcoran work Molly inside the house as well?
She did.
And was it you and Tanya Goldbright, Investigator Tanya Goldbright, were the two people with her?
Yes.
Is there anyone else there?
No.
Okay. Where did the two of you stand when she worked inside the home?
I remember staying outside of the home near the doorway.
So threshold, kind of the area that you mean when you say
Correct.
by the doorway? And then, to be clear, prior to her doing the search, had you done a walkthrough of the home?
I did entry, what we call an entrance video to document what was in the home prior to us going through the home.
Okay. So you walked through, and then you came back down, and then she was able to go in, and that's where what you have previously described.
Yes.
And when she worked through the home, did you document what had happened? Just take the jury through what you did after you learned about what was found in there.
Okay. After she was done with her dog, and that's Mr. Corcoran, she did a walkthrough with us and pointed out areas of interest.
Okay. And then she's already testified, so I'm not going to get into those details. But I do want to ask you about the living room itself. So did you had testified previously and admitted People's 124 that was based on some measurements, right?
Yes.
When was it that you had measured the home itself? When did you do that?
That would have been in August of 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you create diagrams from those measurements, including 124, but also an additional diagram as to the furniture layout in August?
Correct.
If I could publish 124 that's been previously admitted, Your Honor?
You may.
So this is the one that we talked about before we showed the jury the kind of the layout of the living room and the size of the living room. Is this accurate to November 29th, 2012, when you were in there for that search warrant?
Yes.
And then you had taken photographs of the furniture layout, et cetera, from then?
Correct.
Then was there a subsequent search warrant in August where photographs were taken that had the layout of the living room at that time?
Yes.
And then did you create, I'm going to approach it 125, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Does 125 reflect a change in furniture layout between November and August in the residence?
Yes.
Is that, generally speaking, a fair and accurate diagram, even if it's not exactly to scale, just the diagram itself with the layout and some of your measurements?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I've moved to admit People's Exhibit 125 in the evidence.
Which one is 125? Is that the upstairs?
No, it's the living room we've been talking about.
But not the version that's in front of us right now?
It's August version of the furniture layout.
That's fine. So the same one, just without the blue.
Would you like to see it? That is correct. It's the same one without the blue.
Cool. Thanks. No objection.
125 is admitted.
May I publish, Judge?
You may.
Okay. So what's different about the furniture layout here?
Excuse me.
Do you have 124 to reference, or would it be helpful, or can you do it without it?
I can do it without it.
Okay, great.
The couches, the love seat and couch were moved, and tables that were against the east wall moved, TV moved to the north wall.
I'm going to go back to, can you just show the jury some of those items that you just explained? There's a pointer right there, the items that have been moved, and then I can click back to 124 so the jury can see it real quick.
So this, at the big house, this.
Can you pick up the microphone, talk into it, please? It'll come out. Thank you.
So B was against the north wall. C was against the east wall. The high back Paisley chair was over here. The TV was where B is.
If I move to 124, is that what you're talking about in a different location?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm going to publish, and you've lettered the furniture so that it can be tracked, basically. B is that same couch, for example.
Correct.
Then I want to publish 470, which has been previously admitted. So in 470, this is an exhibit that Ms. Gumman, who was previously Officer Corcoran, has testified about some of the train final responses. Can you just point out for the jury what's significant about where B was in conjunction with the northeast corner of the room?
So B was at the north end of the room, and with this would have been in the northeast corner.
Did Officer Corcoran know that going into here, that this furniture had been moved in this way?
No.
So those two blue areas would have lined up at the time that Dylan went missing, at least in accordance with the search warrant on November 29th.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Did you, if you want to grab a seat. And then there were two additional searches, I believe, by Officer Corcoran. One was August 6th and 7th up on Middle Mountain Road, and then a truck in February 13th of 2014, a Dodge truck.
Yes,
Were you present at least for the Middle Mountain Road search on August 6th?
I was.
And in conjunction with that search, can you just explain to the jury how you went about it?
So we brought Ms. Corcoran up to the area where we found some remains, and we didn't tell her where we found them. We just let her get out of the car and let her work her way down to where we found things.
So you took her to the general area that was the remain site, and was part of the purpose of this so that she could perhaps find more remains?
Correct.
And is this the area that you had combed over sort of next to each other in those vertical lines and picked everything up?
Yes.
And then she deployed out from, was it like around that trail and that trailhead right there?
Correct.
All right. And then did she work Molly off leash for that?
She did.
Right. I want to turn your attention to a different topic at this point. We had talked about the phone, the phone that you called Mr. Redwine on, left messages that he later told you was broken.
Yes.
Then so February 2014, let's fast forward. Was there a reason that you had seized his Dodge truck on that date?
Yes, we had a search warrant to recover the vehicle and search it.
Okay, were you present for that seizure?
I was.
And then was the search done at a later date?
It was.
Just related to that seizure itself, can you explain to the jury what caught your attention about Mr. Redwine's cell phone?
Yes. Mr. Redwine wanted some personal effects out of a soft-sided briefcase. I allowed him to go through it, and he was rifling through it, and he picked up an iPhone, white in color.
You recognize it?
Yes.
How'd you recognize it?
I had seen him with it on numerous occasions.
Was it the same phone that he would have had back in June of 2013?
Yes.
And did you have to ask him about it, or did he speak up about it?
He volunteered.
What did he say?
He said, "This is the iPhone that fell in the sink. And by the way, it's working again."
Had he done that sort of in response to you looking at it and seeing it as you had it out?
Correct.
I want to ask you generally about the Dodge truck. Back in November of 2012, did Mark Redwine have both a Dodge truck and a Chevy truck?
Yes.
Was that Dodge truck a personal vehicle of his?
Yes.
And was it a four-wheel drive truck capable of going out on trails and roads like Middle Mountain?
Yes.
So on November 18th, going to the airport, have you seen the video there?
Yes.
And coming through Walmart, et cetera?
Yes.
Which truck did Mark Redwine use for that?
He had the Chevy truck.
Were there other instances where you saw him on Middle Mountain Road throughout the pendency of the case in those early months, et cetera?
Yes.
Was there a sighting on April 23rd of 2013 where he was up on Middle Mountain Road?
Yes.
Which truck did he have?
He was in his white Dodge.
On July 1st, was he up on Middle Mountain Road at a campsite?
Yes.
What truck did he have?
The Dodge.
In July of 2013, was he up there with an ATV?
Yes.
What truck did he have?
The Dodge.
And was that prior to him using or producing the fishing pole, just prior to him producing the fishing pole?
Yes.
So from all your contacts with him, is it accurate to say that he used the Dodge on Middle Mountain Road when you saw?
Yes.
Now in July, when he was up with the Dodge and the ATV, did you then have a conversation with him at his home related to that?
Yes. July 16th, 2013.
And I want to only ask you about one discrete topic in that conversation, but the conversation overall, is this a formal interview or just sort of a conversation?
Just casual conversation.
Is it at his house, for example?
Yes.
Okay. Had you been looking for the fishing pole since you got involved in the case on November 20th of 2012?
Yes.
Why was it important to this case when Dylan was a missing child?
We were told that the fishing pole was missing from the residence, that Dylan may have gone fishing.
Okay. Did that dictate where some of the searches were done?
Yes.
Had the defendant been asked repeatedly to look for it?
Yes.
And was the lake and streams, things like that, continuously searched all the way up to the big search on Mill Mountain Road?
Yes.
So by July 16th of 2013, Dylan's remains had been found on Middle Mountain Road, and it was known that he wasn't in the lake or the streams or anything like that.
Correct.
Had FBI and CBI been in the garage of the defendant's home already?
Yes.
And had you been in the garage with him on occasion, just having casual conversations about the ATV?
Yes. June 7th, 2013.
You had eyes in the garage?
Yes.
And had you or FBI or CBI or anyone ever seen a fishing pole in there?
No.
Had the defendant been able to produce a fishing pole prior to that?
No.
So what did you learn this time when you went to the defendant's house on July 16th of 2013?
Went there to talk to Mark, and then he mentioned how he moved his ATV from the garage and discovered the fishing pole behind a washing machine in the garage.
Did he produce it for you?
He did.
May I approach the exhibits, Judge?
You may. Yes. It was a single piece. Correct.
Can you put it down so the jurors can see Mr. County's face?
Was that one of the locations that the defendant was directed to have looked in general?
Yes.
No more questions. Thank you.
Mr. Moran?
You're aware that Mr. Redwine mentioned that he was able to find the fishing pole because he moved the ATV, right?
Yes,
And so it was obscured by washing machine ATV, right?
yes,
So the movement of the ATV allowed him to find it and provide it to you according to what he said.
correct.
I'll go here kind of in reverse order. When Ms. Corcoran was brought out to Middle Mountain, the general direction of where remains and other items had been found was indicated to her, right? She wasn't told go in any direction. She was shown sort of the trailhead, and it was indicated that she should head down.
It was indicated that this is the starting point.
Okay. And she's testified, and I wonder if you remember, but do you recall giving her more specifics because she needed that for a dog working out in the great outdoors, out where there's more wind variation and the like?
I don't recall.
You don't recall that she was giving greater specificity with respect to the trailhead in Middle Mountain than she was other locations?
I don't recall.
You were in the garage, the Pepsi building, or Area 51 when clothing was sniffed, right?
Yes,
That Coach?
You may.
And you were observing the work of the dog in the Pepsi Center, or the Pepsi building, Area 51.
yes,
And you observed that items were placed out in 3 bags, and then the bags were taken as the dog alerted to the bags, right? Taken off the ground.
yes,
And then there was 1 bag the dog didn't alert you, right? This one with the blue shirt and the green shirt in it.
correct.
And the bag was then opened, and the blue shirt and the green shirt were taken out of the bag, right?
Yes,
And the dog alerted to the blue shirt, right?
correct.
The blue shirt was picked up, correct?
Objection, Judge, going through the findings that the expert witness testified to, I think is beyond the scope, and also it's more proper to the expert.
Well, it's come out through the expert. I think, I'm not sure where he's going with all this, but I'm going to let him do it. Go ahead, Mr. Wren.
I'm meaning to move quickly. I know that this has been heard before, but the blue shirt, green shirt, the dog alerted to the blue, correct?
Outer shirt, blue, yes,
And the blue shirt was lifted from the ground, taken away, right?
correct.
And the green shirt was remaining on the floor, right?
Yes,
And the dog came over, sniffed the green shirt, did not indicate, but went to the location where the blue shirt had been, right?
yes,
And alerted there, right?
correct.
There was some discussion on direct about Mr. Redwine being away for work on one occasion when you were doing some searching. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes,
And you were aware at the time that Mr. Redwine's work took him out of town with some frequency, right?
yes,
And that there was a period in that winter where Mr. Redwine was out of work, right?
yes,
And that had in fact mentioned to you on occasion that he needed to make a living, that he had to get out there and get on the road occasionally, right?
correct.
And you would agree that there were occasions where he searched and he was in the process of organizing searches, right? Specifically, Wendy Kessinger and her outfit.
Okay, yes,
Wendy Kessinger was somebody that you encountered in your work on this case, right?
yes,
And she had dog teams that could go up in the woods and do searches, right?
yes,
And in fact did several in this case, correct?
correct.
And Mr. Redwine was engaging her to do searches with people that he organized, right?
Yes,
And you, through the pendency of the investigation, became aware of Mr. Redwine experiencing some hostility from people who were coming here from Castle Rock, Colorado Springs, and other folks who developed an interest in the case Facebook, television, otherwise, right?
Yes.
Also aware that Mr. Redwine's home was vandalized, right?
I can't recall that.
You don't remember the broken window? The damage to the well?
I don't recall.
That wouldn't surprise you that sheriff's officers were deployed to his house to look into reports of those things.
Yes.
You've become aware that that personnel had been deployed to check on Mr. Redwine's safety and otherwise, right?
Yes.
And there had been a protest at his house, is that right?
There was an assembly of some sort, yes.
And you know that assemblies at a citizen's house have very strict rules, or it's an unlawful assembly, right?
Yes.
But none of the folks who were directly outside his house were told those rules, at least not by yourself.
Correct.
And there was no sort of warning given that this is an unlawful assembly.
Correct.
But those were the folks who went to do the search in June that Mr. Redwine was absent for, as you testified on direct. Folks who had been present at that, what you're calling assembly.
Those folks, present during the 622 to 625 searching?
Yes, sir. Had also been the same folks who were at the assembly outside Mr. Redwine's home.
No, this was a law enforcement search.
The folks from Castle Rock came down to join, and you were suggesting that Mr. Redwine do the same thing, right?
Correct.
And I just want to emphasize this because I think I heard you talking about how you had a video camera available to you when you went to the house with Ms. Corcoran on August 5th, 2013, right?
Yes.
And you used that video camera to video the entry of Mr. Redwine's home.
Yes.
So when Ms. Goldbright or Investigator Goldbright crawled through the window and went in the house, you videotaped that.
I don't recall if the recording started at that point.
Suffice to say, though, that you stopped recording once Ms. Corcoran and her dog were inside the house.
Yes.
And that camera had been available to you all of that day, but it just wasn't utilized to record her work, right?
Correct.
The sniffing that happened at the impound lot first involved a vehicle that a suicide had happened in, right?
Yes.
And that suicide was pretty gory. It was a self-inflicted gunshot wound there.
Yes.
So, for lack of a better word, gory, that the windows had to be left down so that the smell would dissipate, yes?
Yes.
And it was, you could detect it. You were smelling it, right?
Yes.
And the dog, did it jump up on that vehicle when it was sniffing it?
No,
Jumped up on the other one.
it did.
And your testimony was that the victim, or the human who had died of an overdose in the second vehicle, vomited, as is common with overdoses, right?
Correct.
And that vomit got onto the vehicle, right?
The vomit, I recall, was by our head on a pillow.
Any other evidence that organs, was there, did the person defecate or otherwise expel any other bodily fluids?
No.
It was just the vomit?
Correct.
Would have still been present in the vehicle.
Can you repeat this more?
Which would have still been present in the vehicle?
I believe so.
Solo was still there, right?
Correct.
Did you observe the alerts? I think the that you mentioned occurred outside Mr. Redwine's house prior to seeking his permission to enter?
I was told by Ms. Corcoran later where her dog had indicated.
I object for anything further than that because of the same reasons as expert testimony and hearsay too.
Anything else you're going to go on that, Mr. Moran?
I just don't want it for the hearsay purpose that Your Honor has
My question was, are you going any further on that?
I want to know whether anything was located in the yard.
Anything was,
Located in the yard
And that's fine,
on this occasion.
then that's fine.
Investigator Cowing, there weren't, prior to this August search, law enforcement had not, and you've been at prior searches, but law enforcement had not found body parts, blood, other gory things, human remains out in that yard, right?
Correct.
What Mr. Redwine said to you about the phone was that it had gotten wet, right?
Yes.
And then he talked about how it dried out and it was working again, right?
He just said it was working again.
In your experience with cell phones, that happens, doesn't it?
I've never dropped a cell phone in water, so I can't speak to that.
I want to address information you got about the layout of Mr. Redwine's living room. Your first encounter with that, and I think it was Exhibit 125, People's Exhibit 125, where you first encountered how Mr. Redwine had arranged his living room. Would you agree it was November 20th, 2012?
Yes.
And that was the day that you arrived with Investigator Patterson and Deputy Potoff, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Redwine was accommodating on that occasion as well and brought you into the home.
Objection beyond the scope.
I think it's okay. Go ahead.
Knowing that children will hide in a house, the house was searched by both of those deputies, right?
Myself and Potoff, yes.
Outbuildings were searched as well, right?
Correct.
Every closet was searched, right?
Objection, Judge. Beyond the scope. And also, I think counsel referenced 125, and I think you meant to reference 124.
Well, that I don't know about, but that's on the record.
That makes sense. I think it is 124.
Okay.
The diagram of the living room, I believe.
All right. However, I do think you're getting outside the scope at this point. So I'm going to sustain that part of the objection.
When you went in the house on November 20th, 2012, with those other two law enforcement officials, were you wearing latex gloves or any other protective clothing, shoe covering, anything like that?
I don't believe so.
And then on November 21st, law enforcement was back in that house. Is that right?
On the 21st?
Yes, sir.
I don't recall.
Did you at any point when you went in that house wear anything over your shoes?
No.
And as you testified, unfortunately, one of the duties of
Can you get by the microphone, please?
duty of a law enforcement official such as yourself occasionally brings you in contact with the deceased and with human remains, right?
Yes.
You had to take bodies out of those cars that were in impound, correct?
Correct.
You at one point told Mr. Redwine, we work crime scenes that's thrown away a lot of boots and stepped in lots of blood and brains.
Yes.
And that's a true statement.
Yes.
So human blood, human tissue, human hair, those are all the kinds of things that could get on your uniform and work boots, right?
Correct.
Same would hold true for other law enforcement officials that went in that house, to include Deputy Potoff and Investigator Patterson, right?
Yes.
November 30th, 2012, photos of Mr. Redwine were taken at the marshal's office. You aware of that?
Yes,
And that was after a search warrant had been executed at his home, right?
correct.
Mr. Redwine showed up to voluntarily.
Mr. Johnson?
On the scope, Judge.
Mr. Moran?
Your Honor, the implication created by counsel's direct examination is that Mr. Redwine was not participating or interested or willing to help law
All right,
enforcement.
I'll allow it to go forward then.
Mr. Redwine,
Judge, could I clarify? Because my comments were limited to a Middle Mountain search. And so if counsel's going to go through every single interaction with law enforcement on every date, it's going to be a long time.
Well, I will limit it to some extent, but I think he can go forward with it based upon the impression that the prosecution was trying to show. And Mr. Moran, we are going to have to put in about 5 minutes.
Your Honor, I don't intend to go far into it, although he showed up voluntarily on that day and voluntarily agreed to have photographs taken of himself.
Through a 41-1 order, yes.
I see. But he did voluntarily give up computers, right?
Yes.
Mr. Redwine was cooperative and understanding. Fair?
That's fair.
Please provide admonitions not to talk about the case. Don't do anything on the internet. Hopefully you won't be doing it over lunch hour anyway. Don't talk to anybody about it. And don't discuss it amongst yourselves until this case is until you're allowed to do so after closing arguments. So we will take a slightly longer lunch, I guess. So we'll go till 1:15. And with that, the race is adjourned. All right.